Hello, and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify them. And friends, how about you? If you notice this at your own workplace, but there is a wide span of people and generations that you're working alongside. Would you believe that right now in some organizations, there are 5 different generations at work? And if you are thinking, oh, well, it's all the same. It doesn't matter if you're 18 or 81. It's the same, right? Not exactly. I'm taking it from the point of view of being a great people leader. And how do you manage 5 different generations at work to make sure that they are thriving, empowered, and equipped to do the very best work of their lives? So my special guest today, her name is Dana Dillard, and she started her career as a call center agent and worked her way all the way up to C-suite. She's an award-winning leader in the financial services and known for her collaborative style and, of course, humorous personality. She has a heart for the customers that she's served over 30 years. She's also written a book called Jackfruit Leadership, focused on inclusive leadership, helping managers evolve into the type of leaders that they're meant to be. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Dana Dillard. Hey, Dana.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
I am so thrilled to have this conversation with you because I think it is a big deal. Right? It's not like something like, oh, well, everybody's the same, right? We'll just treat them the same. No, right?
Well, I think too often, leaders get the attitude of this is how I lead. But as the workforce is evolving, you really have to think, everybody needs a little something different. And the way I lead doesn't control the universe anymore. I have to really think about my teammates and if I want to keep them and I want to have them learning and entertained and excited about their work, there's a little extra effort that's needed when you have so many different diverse backgrounds.
For sure. And the core tenets of great leadership development, in my mind, is 3 different areas. It's focusing on yourself, like how can you be a better leader? Focusing on others, how can you inspire, lead, coach, mentor the others that are working on your team to do great work? And then how can you learn more about the organization you work within? So I think we're kind of zooming into the others in today's conversation. Again, just to be great people leaders, because let's face it, we've all had horrible bosses over our career, right?
Oh, gosh. Yes, that's chapter 5 in my book.
Yeah.
The horrible bosses and what we've learned from them. That's correct.
If you don't want to be part of Dana's chapter 5 in her book, then ears up, grab a pen and paper, maybe take some notes here. Okay. Let's start basics, simplifying the 5 different generations. Let's define those. What are those age ranges? And if there are any distinct qualities that are typically found in each of the generations currently in the workforce?
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of get them straight in your head as you launch into this. And of course, recognize that, we are broad sweeping statements today. Some people kind of fall between the different buckets, but I do think you have to give some thought to it. And the thing that's the most interesting to me is, of course, generations are defined by the fact that they're around the same age. But what really defines a generation is what that generation has gone through. What are the things in the world that they've gone through together? And that makes them who they are and creates a kind of a separate lens of how they see the world and certainly how they see the world of work. So if you start at the more senior end, the aging worker, that's the traditionalists. That's what they're called. And these are the folks who are 79 plus. Only about 5% of the population. So it's not a lot, but they're still out there. And they kind of grew up in this attitude of top-down leadership, where the CEO and the bosses make the decisions and I do the work. And they see the world as work in and of itself is a reward. And I'm lucky to have this job type of thing. So that's the oldest. Next down from that, the baby boomers. Now, this is the bucket I fall in, barely. So these are the folks who are 60 to 78 years old, born in 1946 to 64. Now, these are the folks who created the grind culture, who are defined by their work, who really don't know how to retire because they've always worked, and kind of created that. If you look up the word workaholic in the dictionary, you'd see a baby boomer in that spot. So that's our baby boomers. And then the next one after the baby boomers is Gen X. So the Gen X folks, remember, they're raised by baby boomers. And so they're really the first generation to see their moms work outside the home, to see a higher divorce rate amongst their own parents and their friends' parents, really for the first time. And then they also saw marriage and work very differently. So here they saw their parents so loyal to their jobs, did everything for their jobs, and many of them got laid off or later in their career. So that kind of disappointed them in how the world of work works. So that's our friends in the Gen X. And then next, we have the millennials. Sometimes people say the much maligned millennials, the everybody gets a ribbon generation, the millennials. So these are folks who are born between 81 and 96. So they're late 20s to mid 40s. Think about like LeBron James, Serena Williams, Mark Zuckerberg is a millennial. And, it's interesting. They're the most educated and most diverse culture of all the generations, for certain. And they're very big on a sense of purpose. Like they want to know that their work means something. And so that's a key indicator in how to lead them. And they grew up, think about 9/11, think about a world that was very child focused, where all the parents are just all about the kids and organizing their whole lives about the kids. That's how they grew up. So that's how they see the world. And then the youngest generation in the workplace is Gen Z. So these are folks who are between 12 and 27. So I'm not quite working yet, I don't think, at 27. And many people, call this group the I generation. They've never known a world without technology, without social media, without a phone in their hand that gave them access to everything. So this is the group. Sometimes they can be characterized as they don't really want to work. But like 78% of them want to work for themselves. They don't have this big vision of I'm going to work for a big company like they saw other generations do. So they're very entrepreneurial. They want to have ownership, and they'll leave a job if they feel like there's not opportunity for them to grow. And they'll leave a job without having another job, which of course the baby boomers would never do. So that's kind of gives you the lay of the land.
Dana, I love this so much. Thank you. You are a master at simplifying. And when you hear it like that, gosh, I'm sure there are tons of light bulbs going on all around the world right now who are listening to this episode. And you go, well, clearly you can't manage these people the same because they are different in every single way. And it's not just about age. And I'm so glad that you said that. It's what motivates them. It's what drives them. It's what their core values are based upon and how they make decisions, right? Not only on their career path, but how they make decisions in the way they work in your organization, right?
Right. Well, and how they prioritize things and how they find work-life balance and what they're looking for in a company. I think the Gen Zers, 90% say culture is the most important thing. Well, I can guarantee you that wasn't the case with the baby boomers. They were happy to have a job, they had upward mobility and had a paycheck. So it's just a very different orientation. And that's why, as we see our baby boomers, who are the majority of the senior leaders, aging out of the workplace, it's like over 11,000 per day are aging out of the workplace. Over 4 million this year alone will age out. And so here we have our Gen Xers and our millennials stepping into those leadership roles really for the first time. God knows they've been waiting for those baby boomers to retire to get out of there so they can have opportunity.
You told me this stat before we started this interview, and it blew my mind. 11,400 baby boomers are retiring every single day in the States. So, what advice would you give people leaders who are looking at succession planning for those who remain, and also a little bit of career planning for those who exit? What would you suggest to people?
Well, it certainly is not an event, right? It's a journey of this moving the baby boomers out of the organization. So I think people really have to give a hard look at how are we running things. If you're still running things from a top-down perspective where the leaders make the decisions and people just implement them, it will fail miserably with this next generation. So really the model should be the leaders standing in the middle, surrounded by their team, getting input and together making decisions. That's the model that's going to be successful going forward. So that's where I would start. Like, are we even set up to support these folks? And if not, then let's start transitioning that. Let's just start educating our leaders on how we're going to move forward. And certainly in the succession planning, I would start investing in ways that make sense to the Gen Xers and to the millennials where they will want to stay. Things like the flexibility, things like respect, things like honoring their work-life balance. Those are the things that they're going to have to just give a real honest look at their culture.
For sure. And nothing breaks my heart more when I see and hear talented people out there who have to juggle 2, sometimes 3 jobs just to make ends meet in this day and age. So when I think about succession planning, I also think about really taking a serious look at your compensation and benefits. So back to the point of what you said, flexibility. If you can't compensate them properly, can you give them flexibility in their schedule so that the people that are out there are not trying to make ends meet with, being an Uber Eats driver late at night just to pay for daycare because they have to report into an office 5 days a week, right?
Oh gosh, it's just, I've never seen it more challenging for this new generation of worker to think, and I've spent a lot of time in the housing space, that dream of home ownership is just far beyond anything that most Gen Zers will ever be able to accomplish, just based on the interest rate environment, lack of supply of homes, and then their income. So we definitely have to look at work differently. And those days of the baby boomer, who's trying to get the boss's attention, who wants to send the email late at night, who would never leave the office when the boss is still there, all that stuff's out the window. It's all about more balance, more flexibility, and really seeing particularly millennials and the Gen Zers, seeing them as people and giving them an opportunity to really participate at work and not just be an order taker.
Yes. And equally, these baby boomers that are retiring every single day, God, there's such a brain trust inside them of institutional knowledge that should not be downplayed. Like figuring out a way to share information from one generation of your workforce to another before they retire, not thinking of it as an afterthought. You're never going to get all of that great info in a 30-minute exit interview, right? Building those mentor-mentee programs in your company with a 1, maybe even 2-year runway before some of these key people exit the operation entirely, right?
Well, I tell you one thing that I find really aggravating is just how retirement is treated inside of large companies. It's treated like it's this event, like it happens on this day and that's it, but it's really a journey. And if we would open, and this is one of my big ideas I wish companies would do, is that they create a task force of 55 plus, talk about, let's look at the retirement journey. It could be many steps, right? It could be reduced to a 4-day week. It could be reduced to 32 hours. It could be you come on as a consultant. Maybe you're an advisor. Maybe you don't have day-to-day responsibilities, but you're a mentor to other leaders. There's ways to have that be a journey and not just I'll be gone in 2 weeks, see ya. But I think that people are afraid to bring it up because if they bring it up, they might be laid off. And I've seen that happen, where someone says, well, I'm thinking about retiring in 3 or 4 years. And the next time there's a layoff, your name's on the list. And then they tell themselves, well, you were going to retire anyway. And it's like, okay, we can do this so much better. Why can't we just openly talk about things and not be punitive with the information that we know they want to retire in a few years? Why can't we use that to the company's advantage? So that's just a huge challenge, both for the worker and for the corporation.
Dana just did a mic drop there. Like, seriously, it's so important. And I think that if you have anybody in your HR teams that are focused on leadership development or organizational development and effectiveness, and that's usually a very niche role or team for a very, very large companies. But I think it's incredibly important. If you are a company of 10 people or 100,000 people, these conversations need to be done with intention. And, to your point, taking inventory of your talent. Where are the skill gaps and helping those people upskill over time so it isn't an abrupt ending when one person leaves and, oh my gosh, how do we do blah, 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 blah. And always having to sort of chase your tail and create new systems and processes every single launch or every single year. It's just inefficient.
Well, and keep in mind the baby boomers like nothing more than to work, right? That's what they're all about. So they would be very open to a role as they kind of transition into this next chapter for themselves. That's what they're all about. It's just showing respect for their experience and working with them on the flexibility and having it be a role where they're really contributing, where their knowledge has weight and where they wouldn't mind helping out the next generation. But to me, it's just all about the conversation. Right? Why can't we just talk about it? What are your plans? What do we need? Is there some middle ground there that everybody wins? But today there's, no conversation. And I know, like I use this example, my dad, he resigned from a company. He'd been working in the business for 40 years and he walked out the door and that was just it. That tells you how some of the more traditionalists would have done it. So we have to evolve. We have to change and we have to say, we respect you. We're not going to use this against you. We're trying to be planful and we're trying to be respectful of the knowledge that you have and making sure that we transition that in a way that works for everybody.
Super smart. All right. So let's break this down thinking about the 5 generations. And there are 3 different elements I want to talk about and kind of go deep dive. As a people leader, how would you recommend that each 5 of the 5 generations, how do they prefer to give and receive effective communications? And how often? Let's break it down.
Well, this is, and again, it's not everybody's one way. The best way, I think, is when you have a team member join your group that you do this inventory. Talk to me about how you like to receive communication. Because when you think about all the channels we have now, right, it used to just be your boss would call you or stop by. Okay, but it's so much more complicated between Slack and instant messaging and texting and FaceTiming and phone calls and such. So the traditionalists, generally speaking, really prefer face-to-face. But when you block in time for that, be sure that you have blocked in time to listen. Because the traditionalists, they like to share their knowledge and they like to have input into things. So it will never be just a one way where the boss, I need to tell you something. This needs to be a conversation where you're asking for feedback and input and making them feel valuable. And then on the boomers, they're much more about treat me with respect. And so particularly if it's something that's, they want to be on the inside scoop. If it's something, it'd be nice that they knew before you told the rest of the group. They are those kind of people who want to be shown the respect and kind of the inner sanctum people. They prefer a phone call or face-to-face, not unlike the traditionalists, particularly the more urgent information is. Of course, we're always going to have emails or transactional things, but if it's something important, that's what they would prefer. So with the Gen X people, they would prefer an email and they are the generation, remember, they're kind of in the middle in the Gen X. And so they're like in this pressure cooker, or they feel they are all the time. So if you can offer to help them or certainly be a listening ear to how's your day going, anytime you're communicating with them, they're okay with every week or so a touch base. But if you offer to help, that'll just open up the conversation more. And then on the millennials, now these are the folks, they like a lot of FaceTime. And they want to be involved in decision making. So if you have communication, things you're sharing, just be prepared to ask for their input. And if you do it ahead of time and kind of get their input on a decision before it's made, you'll get a lot more buy-in. They'll be more likely to get on board with that. So they're more, the younger the generations get, the more frequent they want feedback. And I think that's all tied, don't you think? It's all tied directly to how many likes and how many views you get in Instagram or in TikTok. So they're just used to that instant. And even, taking tests at school where it's all automated and you get your grade immediately. So that's just how they've been raised. Yes. And so managers need to adapt to that. And in my mind, it's more like a daily touch base, a daily, hey, I saw you turned in X. It looked great. After a meeting, I liked your participation in there, just in their mind, frequent. And the more you do it, the more they'll appreciate it. And the millennials, it's funny, in the research, it says that if you don't talk with them, they naturally assume they're about to get fired. So like no communication is really bad because they go to the dark space. And so it's better to just freely communicate so that they know everything's okay. So that's kind of how it is.
Intentional validation daily. And stand-ups can be quick, 5-minute check-ins. Don't make these long, drawn-out meetings. Yeah. Okay, go on.
Yes. Okay. So, and then the Gen Zers, they want to text. Don't bother them with a phone call or certainly a face-to-face. And the text needs to be to the point. Don't go round and round. So if you want something, just say what you want and back and forth. That's that. But then the feedback, you can't go public enough with it. If you look at the traditionalists and the baby boomers, a small group, a small interaction, but you can go public with anything you're trying to communicate. And they're very social, and they love a company where the company mission and the work and the social media all merges together. And so just think about that when you're communicating. That's their style.
I love it. All right. So let's move on and talk about best ways to reward and acknowledge their accomplishments for each of the 5 generations. Fire away.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it is very interesting. I mean, the traditionalists kind of have the attitude that no news is good news, right? Like if you don't ever say anything to me, I assume I'm a superstar. And contrast that to what we just talked about on the millennials. If I don't hear from you, I assume that I'm going to be fired. So it is the mindset. But, the traditionalists, the work is the reward. So they're not expecting a big pageantry or anything. But every now and then they would like a pat on the back, be told they're doing a good job. And they're the group that did, like, if the CEO called them on their birthday or called them on the company anniversary, that would mean everything to them. Again, very command and control mindset. So for the CEO to take their time to interact with them would mean everything. And then on the baby boomers, they're all about rewards and titles. They're the people who put every plaque out that they ever won, every trophy on their desk. So that's, to me, something visual for the baby boomer that other people can see and comment on, and that gives them a big source of pride. Again, they only know how to work. So you're making it very visual that they're good at what they do. So that's baby boomers. Yeah, it's interesting. On the Gen Xers, they're more about work-life balance. So that's what they would like. So when you're thinking about how to reward them, maybe it's something like a meal delivery service, or it's time off, because that's really what they value. And so I would think about it in those terms. They wouldn't mind a small group seeing them get an award or getting a pat on the back, but really they're concerned about their work life. And, as an employer, the happier they are at home, the happier they'll be at work. So everybody wins in that space. So that's the Gen Xer. On the millennials, they, no surprise, an online platform. So if you did something like, think about congratulating them in LinkedIn or congratulating them on your social pages, the company's social pages, or in a town hall or in a presentation, they would enjoy that. That's really the style that they bring to it. And again, a weekly scorecard, something like that, where they're getting feedback from the boss, they would appreciate that too. Again, the paranoia of, I haven't heard from my boss lately, he hates me kind of thing. And then the Gen Zers, to wrap up on the rewards and recognition. So they're used to regular, all the time, every day, likes and thumbs ups and hearts on all their social media posts. So you can't really do it enough. When they turn something in, when they do a presentation, when they participate, when you see them being kind to somebody else, you got to be finding the ways to recognize them on the daily. That's really what they're looking for.
As you were going through that, it made me think about Gen Z, and also for the millennials. A lot of these guys also work remote. And so if they need that daily validation, that daily check-in, it really requires you as the people leader to build that into your weekly structure so that it isn't feeling lost, and that they aren't feeling lost and disengaged in the actual team and the organization itself. I'd seen some stats on companies are more likely to downsize and eliminate remote workers more than people that are in person or hybrid. Which one, that's crazy. But 2, it's because people leaders sometimes don't have visibility to their remote workers. And so there's then this kind of disconnect of trust of like, is she doing the work I've assigned? Is it getting, done? Are we hitting our targets in that way? And I think that it's the onus is on the people leader to build those touch bases, not only for feedback, right? Validation, course correcting and coaching when things are a little bit off, but again, back to this reward and acknowledging accomplishments, right?
Yes, very much so. And I can remember when we first, COVID, everybody went home. I can remember a conversation with baby boomer leaders saying, well, how are we going to attract people? Well, how are we going to know how many keystrokes they had? And it's like, oh my gosh, that's so foreign to how a millennial or how a Gen Zer would run things. And one more thing on the Gen Zers, they're very philanthropic and care about their world. And so a donation in their name or doing volunteer work or giving them time to do volunteer work, that's another good way to reward.
Yeah, so smart. I mean, I remember in your book, actually on page 9, you had mentioned something about how important it is to value and understand uniqueness and belonging in the workplace. And if you don't mind, I'd love to read a little portion from the book, because I think that uniqueness and belonging is applicable to all 5 generations, right?
Yes, very much so. And like you said, everybody wants to be appreciated. It's just in different ways.
Yeah. So in your book, page 9, Jackfruit Leadership, you say this: when you think about actions that result in belonging, the activities look like this: supporting your group members, ensuring that justice and equity are part of each member's experience, and providing opportunities for shared decision-making. When you're thinking about uniqueness, as in what an individual brings to work that no one else has, well, uniqueness can be cultivated with these 2 actions: encouraging diverse contributions, meaning purposefully finding differing opinions and celebrating them, and helping group members fully contribute, meaning going the extra mile to ensure everyone feels safe enough to toss their ideas into the conversation. And this theory of uniqueness and belonging applies to all employees, not just some of them. Can you expand on that idea?
Yes, and that's really why the uniqueness and belonging research really resonated with me, because sometimes when you're looking at, say, diversity, equity, inclusion topics, people feel like, well, that doesn't belong to me, or I don't feel like I fit in there, or I can't relate to it. But everybody can relate to, if you ever had a boss that saw your uniqueness, that saw your talents and shined that hot spotlight on your talents and gave you that opportunity to be at the forefront and get your accolades, I mean, you'll never forget that. And so to me, it's just very easy to understand that the secret sauce for leaders is understanding each of the people on my team and doing that inventory. What is unique and special about them, and how can I facilitate that? And then, do they feel connected? Do they feel like they have a voice? Do they feel like there's fairness? Do they feel like that they can, and I love this phrase, that they can say what they need to say without damaging a relationship at work? And that's really the magic, right? Like, I can say it and we're still going to be buds because we have that trust there. And that's what a skilled leader, yes, that is exactly what they'll bring to the table.
Gosh, I mean, that is such a good line. I will simmer on that for the next couple of weeks. Say what you need to say without damaging the relationship, because I believe strong relationships in work, not only people leaders to direct reports, but also cross-functional peers. It's built on the pillars of trust and respect, right? Which feeds into collaboration and accountability. Without that trust and respect, that I can be honest with you and say things that are direct but not offensive, that helps us grow and become better at what we do, right?
Yes. Well, and you contrast that to how many times have we been in staff meetings where nobody says anything, where everybody plays tight to the vest? I mean, that is just screaming, there's no trust. I can't say what needs to be said for fear of retaliation. I don't want to say anything that I know to something negative because that person responsible for that will get in trouble. So I don't say anything. I keep to myself. I stay in my lane, which is not what we want. I mean, what's right for the company is saying we can openly talk about anything, and we're here to support each other for the greater good of everybody, not just the employees, but the company too. Everybody can win, but it's rare. I didn't used to think that. I thought everybody was super candid and everybody had conversations. But later in my career, I'm like, okay, I see this is how this goes. Don't say anything or you're going to get the stink eye, from across the room. And, it's trust. It all boils down to trust. But I love the research around that uniqueness and belonging. Of all the things that I've read about the team building, that resonated the most with me because I could feel it. I could feel it. And as a leader, when you manage people, you can really see that, recognizing the talents and making the connections for people on your team. I mean, that's what it's all about.
100%. And when your workers are engaged and they really feel like you care about them and supporting their career path, guess what? They're way more productive and you hit your KPIs. End of.
Yes.
So the third area I want to talk about today is when assigning projects, what should you keep in mind with each of the 5 generations? Because this is a kicker, right?
Well, reminds me of like when you're in college and you have to do a group project and you kind of dread it because, there's going to be people who don't pull their weight. So this is an example of that in the workplace. Now, in the traditionalists, I wouldn't assign them to any projects, because they're just at that stage in their career that would be a heavy lift for them. But if you are going to, then have it be a long-term project, something where their experience can really contribute, but not something that's, hot deadlines due today. That's just not their style. That's not how they're going to function their best. And then the baby boomers, they're a team player. These guys love to have meetings, because again, they don't only know how to work. They love to have meetings and they want everybody to win. So they're a great person to have rally the team and to work on a project where you have milestones and accomplishments and lots of meetings. That's what they're about. And then on Gen Xers, they're very entrepreneurial. So to me, they would be better in a brainstorming, innovation, creativity, more than the ticky-tacky stuff that a baby boomer would thrive in. Mm-hmm. And then how about the millennials? They want to be efficient and they like quality. So they don't really want to be involved in long-term projects that drag on for years. I'm thinking like systems conversions, big acquisitions. That's not their style. They're more like quick wins. Let's brainstorm creative ways and maybe not necessarily the details on it.
Interesting.
And then the Gen Zers, these are the guys, they want to be promoted after 6 months. So we have to kind of manage expectations on projects. But remember, 78% of them want to run their own business. So if you can give them a piece to own and treat like their own as part of the project, you'll be better off. They'll be happier and they'll feel like they can contribute. But it's not so much a collaborative thing. Remember, these are our COVID kids, right?
Yeah.
They were home for years during COVID. They have been online and their soft skills aren't the best. So working within a group is a bit more challenging.
As you were going through that, the thought occurred to me, and this may be stereotyping and generalizing, so, with broad strokes here, but the thought occurred to me that we as people leaders learn how to be a great boss or a horrible boss by our predecessors, by our former bosses. And I dare say that sometimes our former bosses are from a different generation than I. And so there's almost like this rubber band effect where it's like, oh God, he's just so much into the nitty gritty and the details. And I just really want to work towards being more entrepreneurial and making swift pivots. That's a baby boomer mentality to a Gen X mentality. And then the Gen X to a Gen Y goes, well, gosh, I don't understand why we're always chasing fire drills and pivoting things so fast. Why don't we be rooted more into purpose and vision and belonging, Gen X to Gen Y. So it's interesting to me to kind of see the trends from one generation to another, because there is sort of this, I'm going to do it the opposite way, the rubber band effect, than my horrible boss before. Or there's less tension behind this and they go, oh, well, I did learn a few things from him, but I'm going to evolve my leadership style to be more relevant to my motivations, my ways of thinking, right?
Well, and I think as a leader, the most important thing you can do is surround yourself by people of other generations and other points of view, right? Where everybody has a seat at the table, where everybody feels like they can have their viewpoint on things. If you just surround yourself with, your cronies that you used to work with, you're all about the same age, you all have the same life experience. Well, yeah, you're not going to have a lot of innovation or creativity and you're missing the boat with other generations. So the boss has to be big enough to say, look, I know the way I see the world is not how everybody sees the world. So let me surround myself with people of a variety of backgrounds, a variety of ages, a variety of life experience, ethnicity, gender, all the things, so that we can see the point of view. Because think of it this way, most companies, their customers, they're very diverse. They're very different. They come from all points of ages and ethnicities and life experiences. So why would you not want your problem-solving group to reflect that? But a lot of times, I say it, a lot of bosses, it's hard for them to imagine that their life experience isn't mirrored by everybody else's, that people see the world very differently. And I think, again, being a boss, you have to be big enough to say, well, I know that's only how I see things. Let's get other voices in there. And I love the question, whose voice is missing from this room? Yeah. Who are we not hearing from? And get them in there and be open to, there's things I can learn too.
I'm so glad you said that, because ultimately what we're doing today in this conversation, and I hope inspiring you guys out there that are listening to us, is to think about how you can be a better people leader, but then how you can bring these 5 generations together so that they can do better work together. A million years ago when I started the Simplifiers, those first couple of years of working and realizing fast growth and, oh my God, I need to hire my first few people, I originally thought I need to find clones of myself, because if I could clone myself, then we can execute more work at the level that we were doing way back when. Boy, howdy, was I wrong. I didn't need clones of myself. I learned over time as a leader and hiring and acquiring great talent is I needed to find people who had the skills and backgrounds that were completely different than mine to build a well-rounded whole team. And that requires diversity in all aspects, diversity in thought, diversity in introvert versus extrovert, diversity in experience and background, left brain, right brain. And when I started to realize that and make different types of hires, our company took off. Things went through the roof. And I've kept that truth with me forever in coaching other teams, but also in, hiring people for future roles as well.
Yeah, it's very important. When you think about a diversity wheel, all the elements of diversity, certainly the generations are part of it, but it's much more complex than that. And I think particularly when it comes to technology and marketing and communications, you have to. If you don't have people of other generations helping you understand how to connect with them, it's very rough.
Now, I encourage you guys that are out there listening today. She has got this incredible book called Jackfruit Leadership. And I would really love for you to give us a quick little overview on what Jackfruit Leadership, the philosophy is. And you have this other site, which is called a Jack Wagon. Tell us about that.
Well, exactly. So in my mind, they're the opposite of each other. The jackwagon leader is somebody who talks more than they listen, who thinks they already have the answer, who really doesn't care what other people have to say because after all, they're the boss. And I find that in my consulting work, I see a lot of bosses who say things like, well, Dana, I have been very successful doing it the way I've been doing it. Obviously. Since I'm the boss. And so in my mind, that's the jackwagon, right? Who can't evolve, can't learn, can't be nimble in the world. And then the jackfruit leadership focuses on uniqueness and belonging. And that's where the jackfruit comes from. The jackfruit is a very unique part of the produce department. At any grocery store, it can be a meat substitute. It can be hot. It can be cold. It's just super unique if you've ever been around the jackfruit. And that's where it came from, the uniqueness. I really wanted the book to be Jackfruit, not Jackwagon, but that's a lot for a cover of a book. So only the jackfruit made the cover. But throughout the book, I contrast how Jackwagon would handle things versus how a jackfruit leader would handle things. So it's really centered on that same research out of San Diego, out of Dr. Randall's research on uniqueness and belonging. And again, I wrote it because it just really resonated with me. So I had this 30 years of experience leading people where I was just, I would stand at the business section at Barnes and Noble and pull books out and read and think, okay, that I'm doing it right. That's how a leader should be. And I would try to educate myself. But, over the years in financial services, I didn't have that many great leaders. And I learned more from what they did that was crazy. Like, I will never do that after certain behaviors, and from standing in the Barnes and Noble department and the book business section trying to read books to fortify me. And so, in fact, this week I got the sweetest note in LinkedIn from somebody that I know that's reading the book. And she said, you are feeding my soul. So many times I think I'm the way I see leadership is not how anybody else sees it, but I see that you and I are aligned. So anyway, that's what the book's about.
I love it so much. And it is a really great read. If you guys are listening to this right now and you're curious and want to read more, go to our show notes over at thesimplifiers.com. You'll find links to everything that we talked about today. Also, a link to her book, which you can find on Amazon or at your local favorite bookshop down the corner. Jackfruit Leadership is what it's called. So as we wrap up, Dana, there's a couple of questions I'd like to ask you that we ask everyone on the podcast. And so here we go. What's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
Well, it's the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It's Haidt is his last name. And I started reading it for research on this presentation. And it's exclusively about Gen Z. It's exclusively about how technology has affected them. And he shares lots of good data and statistics around that. So if you like this topic, you'll love the book.
Love it. Excellent. We'll link that into the show notes. So tell us, who is one person, somebody that you know in your network that you just feel is up to brilliant things? If we could shine a spotlight on him, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have him on the podcast. Who would that be?
Sure. It's Dr. Susan Hanold. And we worked together at a mortgage company years ago, and we've reconnected over the last couple of years. Her title is the Talent Doctor. So she's all about HR and technology. She's doing like two things that I think are really interesting right now. One is on creating a new metrics dashboard to use during mergers and acquisitions. Like, what do you need to look at from an HR perspective on any deal, which has been fascinating. And the other piece is about how can you do remote work in industries that don't naturally lend themselves to remote work, like manufacturing. So she has a lot of research in that space. So both of those are just fascinating topics that are, on the edge and really being fleshed out right now.
Love it. We'll link her up in the show notes as well. So if you guys are curious about the work she's doing out in the world, you can find her there also. I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
Well, I thought about this one, and I think it's my husband. That has, I have a partner who's never tried to dim my light, who's always been encouraging and has frankly sacrificed a lot on his side so that I could shine. And so as parents and as workers and building our lives together, he's always said, go for it, do it. You're the best. You'll be great. It's going to be, he's always an encourager to me. And everybody needs that, right? Everybody needs somebody in their corner who is the president of their fan club. So I would say my husband, Todd.
I love that. Everybody needs a person like that in their life. That is wonderful. Well done, Todd.
Yep. I know, the ultimate hype man. That's right.
Yeah. So you can find Dana at her website, danadillard.com. Also, if you go to the show notes over at thesimplifiers.com, you'll be able to find her link to LinkedIn as well as Instagram. So you can connect with Dana on any of her platforms. Now, my final question for you today is this, Dana. And again, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and time with us. Someone somewhere is listening to us right now, and they are really struggling with one of their direct reports. They feel disengaged. They feel almost combative in their communication style, and they're just not sure how to get this person back on board, back to a place of thriving in the workplace. What's one thing you could whisper into that people leader's ear right now just to encourage them in this moment?
Well, I would look at the overall relationship and see where it got off track and look in the mirror first. Because sometimes, there's somebody that just rubs us the wrong way and that we don't connect with. And I would do that introspective review first, like what is it about them that's bugging me? And then I would write down all the things that are bugging me, and I would see if it's really substantial or not. I've done that before, like where somebody's just getting on my last nerve, and I write down, okay, what are the things they've done? And then when I look at it, I think, well, that's not that big a deal. This is more personality than tasky. So I would take it on myself, and then I would sit down face to face with that person and try to do a reset. And I think most employees, in my experience, when you say, hey, I feel like things are disconnected between the two of us, and I want to be your biggest cheerleader, and I want to be there to support you. So could you join me? I'd like to do a reset and us to start over and reconnect and see how I can support you and not make it about them and what they need to do. That's what I would say.
Genius. Dana, you are a genius. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. It was great. I appreciate it.